All right, we are live. So I got that fixed. So that's good. But all right, so we're gonna go into a few things. But before we do, I need to make sure my computer isn't like freaking out. So please give me a second. Okay, so it's not freaking out. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about liberals and libertarians that make an argument that I think is really sophistry and not so much like an actual argument. So what do I mean by that? All right, so what's the argument in the first place? Why am I throwing liberals and libertarians underneath the bus? So the argument goes like this. Your religion shouldn't dictate what I do in a free society. So that's basically the argument. Like that's basically the assertion. And I recently saw a variation of this when I was going over the Joe Rogan experience, where he had JD Vance on, vice president elect now, and they were talking about the best topic in the world, right? Like abortion. Obviously, not the best topic; it's probably the worst topic in the world. But they're talking about it where it's like it's a human experience, it's a human situation, it's a very complicated situation. I don't like it when people make it simple, or they gave their opinions about it, and it's like, okay, well, you have the autonomy versus the life problem, and that's what JD Vance brings up. But the argument, essentially what Joe Rogan was going up, and I suggest you to go see the video. I can't show it without there being a problem. But like, it's not just him, but it's liberals in general and libertarians that will make this argument where your religion should not dictate what's in society. And it kind of puts the person who has stated their religion in this box, right? Like it puts them in this box, and it doesn't allow for a good discussion. The person who has now made that argument has now what's called poisoned the well, where a good faith argument is now harder, and it requires some unpacking for that to happen. So the biggest frustration about that argument is the assumption of terms. So the freedom to do whatever we want, given a lack of violence, is the general argument. I am rephrasing it from what I said earlier, that religion or your religion should not be imposed in politics to such a degree that it imposes on my free will, as long as I'm not doing anything violent or societally problematic. And so that problematic, like societally problematic, because the reason why I'm adding that is because some of them will add extra conditions that are not necessarily violent, right? Like it may be privacy, or some confidential material. Still privacy, but I'm giving you an example of something that isn't necessarily violent, but what people will prescribe to as in a libertarian position, or from a liberal position about religion. And so the reason why that's a problem, and it's a bankrupt position in itself, is because you're accusing the other person of exactly what you're doing. When you say your religion should not dictate what I do, that person is now saying their religion should dictate what the other person should do. So that may not be obvious to people, but it absolutely is the case. The definition of freedom is not a definition people agree on. The definition of freedom does not mean necessarily licentiousness or license to do something. To a lot of people, and historically, when it comes to America, it was established from the perspective of the freedom to do what you ought to do, which requires an expectation of what you should do. So like that's that's built into like you can read Hamilton, you can read the founding fathers. Like the freedom definition there is not that of the French Revolution, which is what it's become. The definition of freedom is to do what you ought to do. And so with that, when you talk about abortion and you say it's mostly a religious issue, or there seems to be, I think Joe Rogan said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, of course I can't, the idea that we shouldn't be using one's religion as a way of influencing our decisions, and that fundamentally from there, we can't then argue in a objective stance. So Joe Rogan, all right, got it. Joe Rogan said, from his perspective, like the abortion debate seems to have a lot of philosophical components that are religious or something to that effect. And I think he misses the mark there when he describes that, because he doesn't say that about his viewpoint, right? Like his conviction on this is a religious conviction. Like when you have a philosophical, like the difference between a philosophy and a religion in a lot of cases is that the philosophy is like just in your head and you understand what's supposed to happen. The religion is you actually act it out. Like you take those thoughts and you agree with them and then you act it out. So that's in a very general sense of the understanding of religion. Because if you were to go and look up religion, I'll do that right now. I'll show you. When you look up religion meaning, so just Oxford, the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods. The next one is a particular system of faith and worship. And then the third one, which is the one I'm appealing to here, is a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. So like a conviction, a way of, excuse me, a way of like your worldview, like how you view the world is essentially what your religion is, because you act on it. Like you view the world, like how you view the world. If you think science is the most important thing, you will keep science as an important aspect of your life in such a way that let's say what is it, this is where you get scientism, right? Like this is where you get science is so important, we need to make rituals out of it. And we kind of do that to some level here. In fact, it fills in a lot of what religion should fill in our politics. So like, this is like me kind of like going in a very like roundabout way of saying like, you can't separate politics and religion. It is a ridiculous statement to say. And I understand we live in a pluralist society. But that also means that we're going to be voting on what, generally speaking, we agree on most, and that's going to win out. That's not always going to be the best option. Like simply because a whole bunch, like if 90% of people believed one thing was good, that doesn't mean the 10% are wrong. Like that's the problem here. That's the problem with democracy, is that you making a relativistic argument for what is good and what is bad. And so I'm going to let chat come in just for a second, just because I know chat's been coming on. So Mark says, this argument comes from a morally relativistic viewpoint or point of view. Firstly, and secondly, it acts as if culture and morality is independent of religion. It isn't. God sets the rules. And even in the cases of, so I just want to add this, but even in the cases of paganism, it's the same thing. Like paganism still implores a God setting. Like there's this recognition that even though it's not, the Christian God, that it's something, like there's order in the universe and that order needs to be followed. Excuse me. So yeah, freedom is the ability to do what's right, not an unrestricted license to do what you want, right? So I don't want your beliefs imposed on me, so I'm imposing mine on you. So that's essentially what the liberal or libertarian is doing, which makes their argument like that's not a rational position. And I understand Joe Rogan for the most part. Like he seems like a rational person, but I just don't think he's Like I'm using him as an example because he made the argument in the JD Vance situation. It's like, no, like religion is very important to one's thought and expression. And simply because, like he even uses the example of Sharia law, right? Like there's parts in the United States where Sharia law is imposed. Like for example, in Hamtramck, they do a call of prayer. This is where my great grandparents lived. This is a Polish, Polish founded city. That's why it's spelled with a bunch of with very little vowels. City in Michigan. It is run by Muslims now. It is the only government run by Muslims, and on a regular basis, like every day, they do the Muslim call to prayer, and it is, by the way, incredibly loud. I went to an Easter vigil, and as we were about to at St. Florian, and as we were about to set fire to the Easter fire, we literally had to stop because the call to prayer was happening, and it was so loud we had to plug our ears. So like that absolutely should not be happening. Like nobody should be dictated in America based off the freedom you should do what you ought. Like nobody should be imposed to do something to that level. Like even if it was like Catholic rung and the bells were ringing, like bells ringing simply give the connotation that this is the time, right? Like this is like 9 a.m. This is 10 a.m. This is noon. The call to prayer is verbal and it's a command. Well, I don't want to say it's a command outright. It's more like it's not a command outright, but it is like clearly being done. And it's being done, in my opinion, in an incredibly oppressive way. And so he brings that example up, although he doesn't use Michigan, he uses what do you call it? Minnesota. And so this idea of Sharia law and being imposed, well, the reason why that works in America is because we vote on that. And so if a locality votes on that, like that's where the problem comes into play from his opinion, right? Like this is like the problem with having a relativist argument is that, well, locally they've agreed to it. Like me and you as Catholics may find that abhorrent that the call to prayer is happening, but because it was elected, like it's through elected officials that happened, from the standpoint of the government, like there is wiggle room for that to be allowed. And so now it's a matter of, all right, so there's that ritual. Well, what about the ritual of asking for pronouns as you introduce yourself at a school, in your public school, like your kids asking or being asked to say pronouns? That is also a religious ritual, but most people wouldn't recognize that as a religion. I mean, it obviously is a part of a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. Like we have people who literally make their entire identity around that. Like just as we Christians say we are sons and daughters of God, people identify in that way where they're, non-binary or what is it? Just I guess one of I think it's like 70-ish choices you can do on Facebook. So like that's kind of that's a similar thing. That's an imposition. Or like, not really being able to say someone's appropriate pronoun. I'll just say that, like appropriate pronoun, given that they're a man, given that they're a woman, because they think there's something else. And it literally could just be made up. Like, and I know it's like that sounds like everybody knows that, but I don't think people recognize it as part of a religion because that's what it is though. Like, and so this idea of, well, you're religious and how dare you impose your religion? It's like, if I don't impose my religion, what I think is right, somebody else will. Like, that's the problem with this argument, is that it quite literally is a zero-sum game. Now, there are certain extremes, like as Catholics, we recognize this. Like, there are certain extremes you don't want to, like, you don't break. You're not supposed to coerce people into a religion. However, like standing up, going back to the point that he was making, which was on abortion, the whole idea of it's a complicated issue. It's really not. It's self-defense of the baby. Like, that's it. That is the argument. Your autonomy stops when it kills another person, right? It's a fairly, like, if I'm being attacked, I have the right to defend myself, and your autonomy no longer matters. The same thing happens with a baby. If you're going to kill the baby, your autonomy no longer matters. Like, and I'm not saying you need to be killed. Like, that's not, the self-defense argument doesn't go quite that far, because it like, there's clearly a relationship between the mom and the child. But like, there is a real issue with pretending that the autonomy and the life argument has a happy medium somewhere. Like, no, like, they're total extremes. They're in a Venn diagram, they wouldn't even overlap. Like, so like, imagine like this is life, and this is autonomy. Like, this doesn't work where there's like some sort of overlap here. Like, it just doesn't work. You can't be okay killing a baby sometimes, because then you're okay killing a baby. Like, and that's the problem. Your choice of pizza should not stop me from having jalapenos and pineapples as topping. All right, so okay, well, hold on now. Hold on. Okay, hold on. I am totally with you on pineapple, but not jalapenos. My wife likes that combination. I do not. So there's better combinations, and it's certainly not ham. It's consensus liberalism, French, versus American liberalism, US. Consensus liberalism generally holds that freedom is the license to do what you want. It's why the French failed while the US didn't. Right. Like, that's why we're still, like, at least right now, moving forward. Like, the problem is that there's so much of the French Revolution, like, there's so much of the consensus liberalism, that it's like, all right, so now we're talking about consent. Like, right? Like, that's essentially what it comes down to now. Do you consent to do this? Are you okay to do this? Even if it's by yourself. So like, it's not just consent to with another person, like obviously with the hookup culture, but it's like consent to literally like smoke a whole bunch of marijuana and be fine doing it. No, that's not good. That's bad. Like smoking or drinking to the point of being drunk and then going on the road and becoming an issue to literally everybody. Like, you can't do that. Now, I'm not saying liberals and libertarians think it's okay to go out intoxicated in public. Joe Rogan in that video explicitly says that that's a problem and that shouldn't happen, because marijuana does come up, and JD Vance points it to being equivalent to being out in public drunk, which is about right. But there is this issue of, well, I can just agree to it and that's good enough. And it's not. Like, it really isn't good enough. So let's sorry, I'm catching up on comments because I'm like way behind. The belief that Kamala Harris will stop the bad orange man from destroying democracy. Yeah. See, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. France is on its 5th republic. Consensus liberalism is generally unstable and requires legalism, authoritarianism. Right, because like, here's the thing is like, ultimately you do have to put guardrails in. And the guardrails need to have some foundation that actually makes sense. And so like, in that argument, there's a point where Rogan appeals to the wisdom of religions that have been here earlier in the video. And then later, it's like, we don't want a bunch of guys telling women what to do in a religion. And it's like, okay, well, like, you can't have it both ways. Like the reason why, for example, like one of the applications of history or applications of religion in history is the fact that it retains wall barriers even though you may not know what it's preventing, right? Like there's certain aspects that religion may have internally, like, and I'm not just saying Catholicism, but just any religion. There are certain patterns that have been tested, and it's like, all right, we found this to be a problem. We found inbreeding, it's a problem. Science comes back and says, yeah, actually inbreeding is a problem. When within a family, we have what was it? We have you know the idea that a man can be a woman or a woman can be a man, like quite literally is addressed like 3,000, 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. I don't remember exactly what the number of years is in Exodus as an issue. Like when a guy pretends to be a woman or a woman pretends to be a guy, that leads to problems. And it's like, we didn't learn that. Like we're currently in the process of dealing with that again. Because they say that that's just a Bronze Age book or whatever. And it's like, well, I mean, it was right. And it creates problems. So like we have this issue of we don't respect religion enough, but sometimes we do. Like it's like it's a cherry pick situation, and it's a philosophically shallow position to hold. And I think that's what Rogan has. I think he himself just hasn't like really fought with someone about it. And he doesn't have to do it live. Like, I mean, just like with anybody, like to the point where those particular minutia points, caveats have been addressed, because he's clearly a smart man. So like, I'm not saying he's an idiot. Like, that's not what I'm saying. So don't get the impression that I think Joe Rogan is an idiot. It's not what I'm saying. But I do think that when it comes to like there's something that seems to egg him on. Like I noticed when he started talking about the abortion, that seemed to like drive him in a particular like way that he has not shown, or he did not show the rest of the conversation. And that was about 2.5 hours into the conversation. So that being said, I mean, like people should have reasons for why they believe what they believe. Like from a Catholic perspective, we literally have all that. Like we have natural law. We explain that pretty well. Thomas Aquinas started it, and we still have people like today, like Edward Feser, Peter Kreeft, like a number of good philosophers who explain why the church teaches what it teaches and shows the practicality of it to the secular person, or can do that. Like not a lot of religions can do that. Like not without drawing into natural law itself. And natural law is very much like a Catholic thing. Like that's where it came from. So it's so let me go back. Let's see, right? Because right. Because if your religion forms your worldview, and your worldview forms your politics. So like I would even say, like, so that's true, but I would even say like your worldview is enough to be a religion. Because say, for example, you do not have an established religion, you're just kind of winging it. Like you winging it, well, I guess like you winging it forms your worldview. So I guess I think that's right. Never mind. No. Like I think that's right. Except we don't say you winging it is a religion. Like we just say that that's like you don't have a religion. But like everybody, like this is what bothers me. Everyone has a religion. Like everyone has a conviction about something, even if it's just within themselves. And so it's like this idea of, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, or I'm not this, I don't follow a religion. It's like, no, you do. It's just horrendously unstructured. And I don't know if I can trust you as a person to make decisions for me if you're running for office. And I think we have to actually say that more, because that's the point that really gets me about this. Like, I don't know Joe Rogan's, I'm kind of like using him because he made the argument in the video, but like just as a stand-in, like what is his religion? I don't know what it is. I don't know what he finds to be important. And so like if you tell me like, oh, I'm a Buddhist, okay, well at least I have like some structure of what you believe. Okay, like you think the 4 pillars of Buddha is like pretty important. Okay, got it. Like that's good. that you told me that. That's better than quite literally nothing. Because it's like the same thing of when you argue with a Protestant and they never tell you what religion they're a part of. They're not telling you the part that actually allows for you to let me back up. They're not telling you the part that actually allows the conversation to move forward, because part of that is about giving yourself in the conversation. Like if I'm talking to a pagan and they never tell me they're a pagan, they just call themselves like a minority religion, that conversation is not really going to go anywhere, because I don't know where they're coming from. And if I don't know where you're coming from, the transaction of information is not going to be as helpful, and it may be misguided. It's going to be a waste of my time. It's going to be a waste of their time, because they're not being honest about it. And like, that's why you should be honest about like expressing your views. Yeah, like that's a huge caveat though. Like, and the more our culture becomes more and more degenerate, like individual liberalism is, I mean, it becomes like, for example, when you're dealing with prawn, like people will say, oh, well, prawn doesn't really affect anybody. It just affects the individual that does it. No, it affects like a whole group of men, and affects a whole group of women. And then it potentially leads to nobody having kids. And then the society suffers significantly, because now you have a 1.62 birth rate, because you have idolized sexual encounters from a comic book, basically. And like that's kind of where we are right now, by the way. Like our birth rate is 1.62. So like this idea of your individual actions don't affect others, like clearly they do. And that was the other thing about the Joe Rogan debate that I had a problem with, is like, well, it's a complicated issue, and it's like, no, the life trumps the autonomy argument. And also, like, we quite literally need more people. And so, like, that doesn't mean that the person needs to be sacrificed, because the person isn't being sacrificed. They are having their kid. So, like, this is like also a kind of weird argument. Like, that is your kid. This isn't someone else's kid that you're just having, like, that came out of nowhere. Like, it is your kid. You probably, aside from the exceptions, led to the creation of that kid. Like, you had a bunch of choices in between. So like have responsibility for that. All right. When you say I don't want religion in politics, what you mean is I don't want your religion in politics. Yeah. And I think that we have to translate that well, or else people are going to like that's one of the reasons for this video, is like people don't recognize that fact. They treat it as like they're trying to argue, like they're too caught up in the moment of what's being told. They don't take a step back and say, hey, like that's just a BS argument. Like, you're not really saying anything, because basically, we'll use another thing that politics has been using. They don't call it a religion. They say beliefs, right? So like your beliefs and my beliefs, and it's like, okay, well, really what we're talking about are religions. We're not talking about simply beliefs, because when you start infusing like political beliefs and you're acting on them, you've now made that a part of what you agree to in your worldview, which is part of like an expression of your religion. And so like that, like from a Catholic perspective, like, there's a lot of things where it's like, okay, well, we have, like, I just want to say it's the perfect religion, by the way. Like, it is like the religion that when it comes to like keeping all of this stuff in order, like we actually know how to do it. It's just a matter of like, we're always going to have the problem of human greed, like the desire for power, ambition, right? Like that's the problem, is you get people who are in positions of power that then act on it inappropriately. And like, here's the thing, it still happens. Like like it happened under Biden. It happened with Gretchen Whitmer here in Michigan. it would not have taken them much effort to go full tyrant, like to go full, like just full on doing that. Like when you have most of the people living in fear because of, you know, the COVID, and you have all these laws in place, and you say they can't get a job unless they get the jab, or they can't do this unless they get the jab, or they can't do that unless they get the jab. Like you're putting everybody in a situation that it could have been incredibly easy to just turn our republic into an empire. Like if Biden was younger, that may have happened. And I'm not saying that necessarily because I think Biden, it's just a matter of like I don't necessarily know if he himself would go that far, but like there's a lot of indications that this was like it could have gone that far. And I don't think people recognize that. I think they just kind of say, "Oh, well, like everybody was just the way it was." No, like it's very easy to just go. I mean, we see that in other countries all the time. Like history is filled with that crap, where someone was given the opportunity and they went forward. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there. So, bells do scatter demons. So holy bells, sacred bells, scatter demons. Yep. You can always tell who is actually from Michigan talking about Sharia law because everyone outside the state thinks it's Dearborn, but real ones know it's Hamtramck. So I'm going to say another thing on that point. When I was watching the election results, people were talking about, well, the Arab population, specifically like talking about Muslims in Michigan, is significant. And I'm like, guys, like we have like 240, 250,000 Muslims. We have like 200,000 Chaldeans too, that historically voted Democrat and are now transitioning to voting Republican. Like that's a big deal. And yet all anyone talks about, they'll say Arab, and the implication there is Muslim. They're not including the Chaldeans. Like they are including the Chaldeans, but they're kind of like, oh, well, they're actually Muslims. Like kind of, you know what I mean? It's kind of like grouping inappropriately because they are like Chaldeans are here because of Muslims in Iraq. So like that's quite literally why they're here. So it's like this idea that they're like the same population. They're not. And so completely, you know, different beliefs. Both Abrahamic religions, but different, very different beliefs. Let's see. That's interesting. So loud that we had to plug our ears. It has been said that the devil shouts while God whispers. Yeah. Yep. Because Hamtramck, yep. That's the Polish spelling. I expect Hamtramck to be renamed. I do not expect Hamtramck to be to stay as Hamtramck. Let's see. So yeah, like that. Yes, and in Michigan, like we have this, like there's a Native American population here. Like you grow up and you learn about it, and that comes into play a little bit, but it's a very minute detail, and in a lot of cases, people don't even understand what that means. Like it's yeah. Let's see. All right, yeah. We also have to consider the influence of postmodernist philosophy and Kant on his opinion, since Kant originally postulated that reality cannot be known with certainty from observation. Right. So, like from observation, like which kind of goes like when you think about that, that goes against science, right? Like, but a lot of like you know when you hear about atheists and agnostics, which are not the same, by the way, like they'll treat science as certainty, but it goes against Kant, which influences their perspectives in other ways. But I do think that's somewhat correct because of like philosophy is not necessarily science. And I agree with that. Like seeing something doesn't mean necessarily that thing happened. Like eyewitness testimonies show that over and over again. But like in science, like there's human error with that too. But when we're talking about like things that actually matter, like moral absolutes, like you can't actually see it. Like you can't actually absorb it. It's just, it presupposes the actions. It's a presupposition of the actions. Let's see. Thus, certainty about reality breaks down, so does morality, because it is based on natural law. And then finally, you get the breakdown of reason because the only certainty comes from emotion. So I get what you're saying. Okay, I get what you're saying now. Sorry, I should have read the second one. Whatever. I'm sorry. But the I agree with that. Like that's clearly a problem because natural law, but like natural law also does a very good job of going towards a, like, this kind of goes with what I was saying earlier, is it tends to go through an aggregate understanding, not necessarily an individual's understanding. Like there are certain sins, for example, like that deal with prawn, for example, that the individual sin is can be explained through natural law, but like the idea that science and natural law have a very similar outlook on a lot of areas, but are applied in different ways. Like one obviously more philosophically, and the other more practically with like what we do basically with our hands. Like that would be excuse me, that would be a problem. Like don't get me wrong, there's type 1 and type 2 error and you get all that stuff, but like there's some truth to what Kant's saying, but I think he takes it too far. Like the idea that like I'm like messing with the camera right now, like I just messed with the camera. Like that's an absolute thing. I absolutely did do that. And I could tell because I observed it getting darker in the image than what the actual light is there. And so like it kind of like I affected it. And so like that's, yeah, whatever. I'm trying not, okay. I think that's going a little bit too far down the rabbit hole. So I'm going to kind of ring it back. Okay. Yeah, and that's what basically the left does. Like Latinx, like a Latinx is about introducing gender neutral, specifically from the English speaking language, understanding into the language. And that's obviously wrong. Like that's like that's like a weird cultural appropriation while at the same time cultural invasion, because language is so tied to culture. Like it's like that's why it's important. That's why words are important, is because words are so like integrated into our understanding, like into our culture, but also into our own thoughts. And so like, what is it? Sorry, there's like a rod in my way, so I can't quite see everything that I'm reading. But yeah, that, I mean, it makes sense, but it's also like clearly problematic because it basically creates new lies, or it creates new put downs, like the politically correct situation, right? Like that whole thing, politically correct by itself is an application of that. So it's and that's wrong. All right, so now we're going back to pizza. All right, yes. We'll get pizza. That's fine with that. I'll just have pineapple and mushroom or pepperoni. Let's see. Let's see. We can't drink till we get drunk. I have already started a drinking game for taking a shot every time he says liberal. Okay. I can't say that word anymore then. So I'm gonna have to stop because I don't want to cause you to sin or influence you to sin. Baby had changed the water. There's no chance of survival. Yeah, that's what really gets me, is like the culture of death and what let's for the sake of Damien, big L's, what the big L's do is clearly problematic, and it doesn't lead to human flourishing. It leads to the death of people, to the point where we are actually creating pods to kill people in, and that's clearly a problem. So yeah, our culture is really screwed right now. Black pill with white pill, right? Like it's always both. The issue I have found typically is that when you're trying to explain the problem, the definitive nature of morality and religion, people resist because being wrong means giving up your sin. So yes, as long as you're not being presumptuous, because there is this, like, oh, I know why, like this attitude where you're like, I know why you're against this, and not a lot of people, respond well to that. So, be careful, because even though you may think that they're like defending, like for example, prawn, like they're defending prawn, that doesn't necessarily mean that they themselves do it. So that there's that. If only he'd somehow like written a guide or sent people out to teach to us with some kind of authority. Yeah, and that's why when he when Joe Rogan in the conversation sorry, when Joe Rogan in the conversation, he says like, I'm a man, I'm not a woman, like, and kind of appeals to the argument that because I'm a man, I can't have an opinion on what a woman does killing her child. That it's like, why would you leave it up to the woman? Like you're kind of promoting her to do something that is against her good, like the killing of her child. Like you're letting her choose that, and you're not being a sober individual, bringing her back to reason. And so like this idea of, because like they were all over the place in Michigan, like we had a whole bunch of like, don't vote for so and so because I needed an abortion or else I would have died. And it's like, no, you didn't. Like you didn't need an abortion. Or like maybe you're defining abortion in an incredibly loose way. Like because they, a lot of big L's think that abortion would include an ectopic pregnancy, and that's not the case. However, they write the definition. If you ever look up, I'm probably saying abortion enough that they're going to put it below my video. If you look at the definition of an abortion medically, because we have such a morally bankrupt health system, it's described as a procedure that ends a pregnancy, which would include the C-section that my mom had. Based off that definition, that would include the C-section my mom had in which I was born. So clearly, if it includes the C-section, that's a ridiculous thing to define an abortion as. Instead of like, you have to always include the intent to kill the child. Like that is always part of an abortion. So I have not seen a single Joe Rogan video. Maybe I should look him up. Right now I'm doing a study of process theology and dragging my face across broken glass. I mean, I haven't studied theology in a formal way, so good luck with that. Oh my gosh. Wow. So if you're going to look at one video that really showcases how good Joe Rogan is, go to the one where he has a conversation with Trump. Like that is an incredibly good conversation back and forth. Like they play off each other. It's great. Because I wanted to make sure I watched those before. Well, I was only able to watch the Trump one before the election. I watched the one with JD Vance today, and that's not to say I didn't like watch other aspects of the conversation, because I watched the Trent Horn video that talked about JD Vance's position on abortion and how it's lacking. And I obviously agree with him. I think that like he does a good job of showing why JD Vance doesn't go far enough. Sir, we do call that a religion. You've met neo-pagans. Yeah, yeah. Yes. um, of course, people love their sin. It asks nothing of you, and it's easy to love something that makes no demands, especially when you don't see what it takes while you aren't looking. So, like, I think that's like, I mean, think about it. For most people who have that, oh, I can't do this anymore. I can't go through with it. In a lot of instances, it's because they see the baby. Like, I think it's the percentage is around like 80 or 90% of women who have an ultrasound do not follow through with the abortion, which is a crazy statistic and like should have absolutely happen more. Just like how, there should be more altar boys for more priests to come out. Like it's the same type of understanding. And so like that, um, yeah, that's a great way of passing something that will reduce abortions without passing a ban. So definitely try to promote that in your state. Maybe run for office. Get the liberal. All right, I already said it. Liberals out. So neo-pagans, wasn't there a movie about that? Some guy named Neo who fights a bunch of ghosts with guns in a greenish world. No, that okay. No, Neo. I hope you know what neo-pagans are. If you don't know what neo-pagans are, just type it and I'll give you like a short rundown. The flag. Good. I'm glad. And the heart is like right. It's like right there behind my hand. It looks great. I'm still worried that it'll fall down because I had to readjust a sticky tab because I'm trying not to poke holes in that wall, so I don't have a nail in it. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let's see. Now I'm starting. Yeah, but some people don't know that. Like I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. But some people don't know that, or they like it's still that they don't know that, but they think simply because they speak Arabic that they must be like that's what it means. Because there are Chaldeans that know Arabic and speak Arabic, but they aren't Muslim, and that's like a recent phenomena. Like there's like a whole Syrian, Catholic, Chaldean, Assyrian of the East situation going on. I don't know that much about it, but Jerry, my friend, tells me about it, and holy crap. Transitioning to voting Republican, can we now have that class of trans people? Oh man. In a single paragraph destroyed episode. Okay. The funny part about Kant thinking that there can be no certainty through observation is that all thoughts are observations, even emotions are. Right. Which has influenced heavily psychology. And psychology psychology in a lot of cases has become the pseudo religion of America. And we see this applied in a lot of different ways. Now, don't get me wrong, psychology, when applied correctly and with, let's say, within the parameters of reality, like I think that's probably the best way of saying that. Absolutely works. Like, it does help because there are mechanisms in the brain that you have to help with. But like when it comes to like, especially with what's going on now, like this idea of LGBT, like trans need to be affirmed always, and like you get into that thinking, and there's no basis for that in the psychology. Like whatever. Sorry, I don't want to go on a rant about that because in Michigan, like I know you know this, but like there's because you live in Michigan, like Prop 3 is a real problem. And then like Gretchen Whitmer just passed a thing that said medical staff, medical professionals cannot try to detransition a person, which makes zero sense to me. It's like the weirdest one-sided argument where it's like, okay, well, you can't do that unless you're like you can't detransition someone unless you're affirming them. Whatever. It's uh I used to work at a lab, like in a call center, where 8:30 was our latest. And between 8 and 8:30, we did get people that would yell at us. This was during college, my undergrad. That's funny. Introverts everywhere. Let's see. Okay, talking about phone calls for a second. Still talking about. All right. So I'm totally here. I am with you. We're talking about the Badger thing, but let's see. I'm assuming you know. I'm assuming you know what neo-pagans are now because you haven't asked for it. So, um, but yeah. So like that was pretty much all I wanted to say. I didn't really wanted to say like anything in particular outside of that because I did want to make it a little bit more contained um, than what I've previously done. And I've only got like 2 days to do streaming, and so I was like, I need to do streaming today, like because I don't have much time because I haven't looked up anything yet. Um, welcome back to the front of the chat. Yeah, I'm sorry. You guys like were blowing me away. Um, I just kept going. I just kept going. In yep. Gosh. Okay. So what else is there? Gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna say if you don't have kids, are you studying to? Are you in seminary to be like? Are you discerning the priesthood? I have to wait like 15 seconds for a delay or whatever. So like, um, I do think I do think the philosophical underpinnings are important though, because that's the only way you can really attempt to minister to those people who don't want to see religion. Yes, like that's why natural law is really good. And that's why it's like really annoying when Joe Rogan was like, well, there seems to be a religious underpinning to it. And it's like, if you're saying like motivation, well, absolutely. But like if they're using like arguments like, hey, like the baby's alive, like you kill the baby. No, no, you don't. You do not kill the baby. Like that doesn't make any sense. Um, like everybody knows why killing a baby is bad. And I mean, I don't get caught up in the whole like fetus, baby, child. Like they quite literally all mean the same thing to most people. So I don't understand like why people get like they have a stick up their butt about it. Um, sorry, I've also noticed I've been a little bit looser of the like in terms of my idioms. So sorry. Nope. In the diaconate program, I have to go through some, shall we say, some problematic literature. So you're not discerning the priesthood. You're becoming a permanent deacon. But aren't you like, I don't know how old you are. So, right. Like, so I think the biggest problem is we, because a lot of this, all right. So I'm going to go to like what I think the root of the problem is. And I really do think it's public schools. I really do think public schools just like I think it was Pope Leo the 13th warned that it would skew people's understanding of reality if taught inappropriately. And now we're at a point where like that's very clearly the case. Like that warning was a prophecy. And like we have this problem of the public schools do not teach philosophy in a way that is coherent. Excuse me, I've got like small burps. Like they'll teach philosophy like, oh, well, Kant is the same as Hobbes, and Hobbes is the same as Locke, and Locke is the same as Aristotle. And Aristotle, like they're all words on paper. Like it's completely fine if you just pull one of them, as long as you don't hurt the other person. And it's like, that's basically what philosophy classes are. And it's like really, really frustrating. In like to have that as a high school class, if they have it at all. Because they don't want to promote a moral system. And when you start going into Aristotle, you naturally go into natural law, because like the next question after reading Aristotle and Plato is, okay, well, has this been developed more? Like that should be the next question that comes. And the answer is absolutely. And then St. Thomas Aquinas. In fact, like when I came back to the church, a huge influence to me was when I actually asked that question. I was in college. I was transitioning from Kettering to Michigan State, and I went to Mott Community College. I asked my philosophy teacher, I said, what is the most reasonable religion? So I guess it wasn't quite exactly the same, but I asked, what is the most reasonable religion? And he looked at me and he thought about it for about 2 minutes. And he was like, I'd probably have to say Catholicism. And I don't think he was Catholic. And he went on to talk about St. Thomas Aquinas. And he actually gave me my first list, which I still have today. Like this is probably like 17 years ago. My first list of philosophy books. I haven't read them all, but like it was my first list of philosophy books I should read. And it helped me come back to the church. Like that was like the first step in God helping me come back to the church. Because I was lapsed for like 2 years, 3 years at that point because of a girlfriend. So I was stupid. Yep, I was stupid. That's all I can say. I didn't do anything stupid. So like I guess like I didn't go, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to leave it at that. I didn't, yeah. Because I'm expecting my kids to watch this later, and I don't want them to have the wrong idea of what I did. I did not do something stupid, and I think you know what I know. I think we know what I mean by that, kids. So if you're watching this later, problematic as in modernist, yes. Like so, like that public school, you would do. So like what people will do, and this is kind of what JD Vance did in the conversation with Rogan, is that there's an average of means, or the means of virtue. He appealed to like this like debate. When we have this debate, like the average of what comes out will be handled based off what the states decide. And it's like that is not a good way to necessarily go about it when the people making the arguments are flawed horrendously. And this is essentially like, in a way of understanding that is like a Bayes argument. So like the I don't know if you know the Bayes theorem, but basically when you just keep introducing the wrong things over and over and over again, whatever the average is from all those wrong things, it doesn't make it right. And your exposure, which is what the Bayes measures, is just, it's going to be skewed, and you're not even going to have a way of understanding why it's skewed, because that's just what it is. Like you're not like, it's like you're always eating candy, and then you have something like candy corn, and because it sounds like a vegetable, you think it's good. Like that's the type of thing that we're talking about, because you don't have a foundation, or like people can be put in such a position where they have nothing but bad inputs that they think candy corn is actually a good vegetable for themselves. And I know that's like a ridiculous example, but I think it shows the point of like, if all you're eating is candy, like you're not getting good stuff, but in the mind, it's the same thing for you. So, yeah, growing up for me, like I graduated high school in 2006. Like it was pretty bad. I would constantly get told by my atheist friends that the Big Bang disproves God. And then I finally got access to the internet and found out the Big Bang was presented by a priest. So that was a fun revelation. um, yeah, like my formal philosophy classes, like were logic. Logic was my first formal philosophy class. My next one was political philosophy, which dealt a lot with Aristotle, but we also talked about Hobbes and Locke. And the teacher was bold enough to bring up St. Thomas Aquinas. This was at Michigan State, and he brought up like the explanation of what, like, he kind of like did a mic drop moment on St. Thomas Aquinas, like, and morality, and basically was like challenging everybody to beat Thomas. Like, it was kind of funny, but at the same time, like, nobody took him up on it. So, but my third philosophy class was a feminism class. That was fun, and that was one of those things where I just wanted to understand the crazy. I wanted to understand, okay, well, this is a position that they hold. What's their best arguments? And essentially, it was like boiled down. It was exactly what everyone criticizes feminism to be, is that they're trying to bite off more than they chew, and that it ends up becoming a fight against men. And it continues that even when equilibrium has been achieved, because we see that, like, we are quite literally seeing that now. Equilibrium has been achieved, but they're still pushing. While at the same time, their movement is being undermined by the trans movement. So that's a whole fun thing. Okay, that does sound pretty cool. Like film class, the philosophy of film, like that sounds pretty cool. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what process theology is. But also, when you said you're becoming the diaconate, does that mean that you're like, it's a transitional diaconate or a permanent diaconate? Oh geez. Okay. Yeah, you guys like just go. Well, thank you. I did kind of just make that one up. I do like candy corn, so that may be a problem there. But that, yeah, the association, like the superficial associations, are clearly dominant within our culture. Like, where we don't look at substance, we look at hype. And like that's clearly an issue. And I actually think a lot of that comes with the conservative movement on pushing the market in a way that is unhealthy, to the point where we are at this stage where advertising is in such a way where everybody's getting bits of candy in the form of commercials. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually really excited to see Sonic 3 with my kids. The problem is, it's candy for me. Like, I don't need, like, me as an adult, I don't need those lessons. right? Like I am fairly competent without those lessons. I have grown up with those lessons. I don't need that show to show me that. But with my kids, that's something where, like, I think Matt Walsh does a good job of explaining this. That's a time where you can come back with what you really, really enjoyed as a kid and now do them with your kids. And so, like, I'm actually looking forward to watching that. But like, I'm also using that as an example that, I mean, like, let's be honest, a lot of people our age, ranging from like mid 20s to 40s, we know a lot of adult children. We know a lot of people who have not let go of their hold on things. And I'm also speaking from experience myself. Like there are some things that I'm trying to let go myself and I am in the process of removing them in my house. But like it is hard, especially when you're coming from a broken home, because you kind of lean into things emotionally. And so like getting corrected, like it takes some time. And so oh crap, you guys are like way ahead now. Is the sin on Halloween? um so he didn't quite say like beat St. Thomas Aquinas. He posited a point. I forgot exactly what the point was, and that's what he wanted people to beat. And nobody took him up on it. Gotcha. Okay. So you're at least 30. So, okay. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just know they're going to drop some Aquinas level brilliance. And then they're like, in response, they're like, who's Aquinas? And you're like, okay, all right, well, I'm sorry the school system failed you. Like, I mean, again, that goes back to like my Catholic schools video, where it's absolutely ridiculous the standards we have for Catholic school. And then also at the same time, like I am getting more and more livid about the kid, like where my kids go to, because it's like on almost every single level, there are like major failures happening now that are becoming like more and more obvious. And it's really frustrating. So I'm not gonna say where they go to, but it's not a fun time. Um Yeah, that doesn't at all go with our theology at all. That he's the unmoved mover. You can't move as the unmoved mover in that way. Like pure action can't. Okay, whatever. All right. You know what I'm talking about. So that whatever. Um, so I don't think I've said liberal in a while. I hope you're taking small sips. So that sounds like a type of paganism. Man, that sounds like okay. So okay. So going back to my kids, this is gonna totally fit. My kids are really excited about uh watching Transformers 1, which they will hopefully be able to do soon. But it's like the origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron. And at the heart of it, like at the heart of Cybertron, which is the home planet, is Primus. He's the original like person that was like an Autobot or whatever, a transformer. And he transformed into the planet. And all of the people, so if you go into the understanding of Transformers, all of the this is so silly. All of the Autobots are extensions of himself. Like they are like manifestations. Like Optimus Prime is an extension of his spark. So is Megatron. So is Ratchet. So is Ironhide. All those, whatever. I'm just whatever. I liked watching the videos. I didn't really watch the show when I was younger. But like that's like really weird because that's how that is. Like and they're supposed to do better and make Cybertron better. And so like I don't know. It's like weird. Let's see, ad for okay, that's funny. 13. Who cooked the cook? Yeah, like who cooked the cook? So there's this meme. So like my wife has a meme channel, and there's a meme that is in one of the videos. An atheist asking who made God is the same thing as asking who cooked the cook. It's like, okay, well, being cooked is not something that the person who cooked the meat has. Like, it's not a quality he has. And it was funny because there was an atheist who responded and saying, well, like being cooked is nothing like being made. And I'm like, being cooked is an analogy for contingency. And like, what are you talking about? It absolutely is. Like, I don't think you understand analogies. And he didn't respond back to that, but it was really funny because like, um, I think that that's such a good comparison. I do like, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't even know who that is. Like, you guys are off in a field that I'm just not familiar with. I understand what you're saying. I think Damien did a good job of explaining it, but like, man, I can't. No, I'm just done. The easier way to describe it is that God is the essence of being. It is in his nature to exist. He must always exist. I don't know. I like the description of. I mean, I understand for most people that'll probably resonate, but like I think my favorite way of describing it is that he's pure action. Like he actualizes everything all the time, um, and sustains everything. But I think that's just me being too nuanced, like for myself. Like I get what you're saying. Um, yes, I am. I don't want to go into all these rabbit holes. Like this is the thing about like what we have too is that all right. So you have like liberal theology, which is not okay, and then you have process theology, and then you have Gnosticism, and then you have like a regurgitation of like all these other heresies, and then as Pope Benedict stated, we have postmodernism, relativism, modernity as the synthesis of all of them. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, like we are quite literally dealing, like, this is what frustrates me is our society, like, it hasn't even been 10 years since same sex marriage has been legalized. That should scare people. Like, it hasn't even been a decade. And the state of our culture is so degenerate now because of that. And people were told, I remember very vividly being like, okay, well, this is just going to allow a whole bunch of things, including like the trans issues. And it absolutely led to that. Like the slippery slope absolutely happened. And part of that is because we don't have our guardrails up in society because we're living off of like the fumes of a society that once was Christian. Like we don't live it, like I argue the point that we don't live in a Christian nation anymore. Like in terms of the population itself, we have way too many practical atheists. We have way too many practical agnostics. And then like when you get challenged by them, when like conviction is required of those people, like a lot of them just fail. They just absolutely fail. And we see that in our politicians. And the reason why politicians are important is because it's a reflection of what people believe. Like that's actually a good thing in that respect, not in the respect of like it's good to always average out people's decisions. Like abortion and not abortion cannot be averaged out. Like that's someone dies. Yeah, unless it's pout pout. It has to be pout pout fish with a pout pout face. You got the heebie-jeebies all over the place. Okay, so like I know about moral theology, like that's fine. Like I know about the whole like formula. Or I guess I'm more okay, we'll train him as a classical Jesuit. Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. I mean maybe, I don't know. I know the history of some things, but like of especially Japan, like I think that's really awesome what St. Ignatius did. But moral theology, I think, what is it? The best way of understanding it, as per what's her name? It's right there. Dr. Janet Smith, sorry, is the like formula of action, situation, and intent. That can give you like an incredible amount of information and direction. And so I've basically been using that since I saw her talk and read up on it, but like that was during college. So, oh no, oh no, I'm sorry. um, okay, I don't even know what that is. We have gone so far off what I was originally talking about. It's okay. It's fine. If you're watching this like on your phone, because I'm pretty sure you that was the indication from one of your comments before. Man, thanks. I don't know how you can do that. That's a lot. Hopefully you have like a giant screen. Okay. So I was gonna actually bring up, let's see, add to stage. I was gonna bring up Brit. Okay, so this is the crazy thing. Britannica. I had to go to Britannica because if you look up what religious faith is or faith, you get up like the definition within Oxford and others is like horrendous. It's just really bad. Let's see, 4 and 4. Got it. It's just really bad. And part of that is because when like the definition keeps changing. And I've noticed in the last like 5 years, definitions of words change in such a way to really box in the Christian or the Catholic. Like uh people who really want to explain things, like faith, for example, is religious faith almost always like when you go to let's see. Sorry, this is like throwing me off. So if I were to go to religious faith meaning, um a belief in and trust in a deity or other spiritual force seen as a setting standards of conduct. So basically it's this idea of like there always has to be a deity, there always has to be some spiritual force involved, and I don't think that's correct. um, and I think that's too much of a modern take on the definition of faith, that it doesn't that it's too narrow. So like here it says inner attitude, like one's inner attitude, I think is like an excellent description of faith. And faith can be understood and is typically understood as religion, um, conviction, or trust relating human beings to a supreme God or ultimate salvation. So basically, it gives the leeway, like the proper leeway, to say to an atheist, no, you have a religion, you live it out, you don't think there is a God or any gods at all, but like that's part of your religion. And so like that's um and I know atheists don't like to hear that, but like that's kind of their problem with it. Like that's just how to understand that. Also, before you go, I recommend looking up Chardin's beliefs because it is possible they will teach your kids his thoughts at Catholic schools. Okay. So, when 9/11 happened, oh my gosh. So you're bringing up a touchy subject for me, and like I will totally do that now because like that's an actual practical problem that I need to address or at least be aware of. But 9/11, like they were bringing out like the 2004 talking points of Islam is the religion of peace, and it was like, no, it's not. Like my kid came home and said that. I was like, it's not though. Um, and it was funny because the Catholic school has Chaldeans in the in the classroom, and so I don't know how they can tell. And I actually texted a guy who's married to a Chaldean, and he and his kids are Chaldean, obviously. And I was like, hey, like this is what they're teaching in the class. Just a heads up. And it's like really crazy to me that some guy, some random guy here, is going to tell Chaldean kids that the religion of peace, Islam is the religion of peace, and don't worry that they pushed you out of Iraq. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like just absolutely crazy. And so, because like my kids asked, hey, like, why is this not the religion of peace? And I'm like, the Chaldeans are here because they got pushed out by the Muslims. Like they displaced a whole bunch of people who do not have a skin color that reflects this, area. Like we can explain like all the skin colors of the people within a, certain demographic. Not to say that they're bad. It's bad if they're here. Like that. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But that the reason why Chaldeans are here specifically is because Muslims persecuted them. And so to say that to Chaldean kids that, oh yeah, this is the religion of peace is like the craziest thing I can think of. And that's so tone deaf, just so absolutely tone deaf. And like my kid was fed the statistic that 99.7% of Muslims are like peaceful because they're not the ones doing the specific actions. But like we've had surveys that have surveyed Muslim countries, and even though they do not participate directly, they absolutely support the actions and they say so. So like they're given a whole bunch of BS statistics. And so like that was something that really pissed me off because I'm like, don't tell my kids something that's not true. Like you're supposed to be above that. This is a Catholic school. Stop being stupid. So clearly I feel strongly about this. So faith, the belief that someone else will take out the trash and do the dishes. Wow. Yes. Especially when the kids are assigned to do that. That's a belief in miracles. All right, yeah. I gotta catch up to you guys. I'm sorry. No, they just believe in the most ridiculous religion, which is we're here because of nothing. It's just the most ridiculous religion. Yep. And that's what's crazy about that statement. It doesn't make sense from that perspective. Yep. Well, yeah, all right. So yeah, the that is something. So like because of that, so you're bringing up like obviously a sarcastic point, but like because of that, I have to actually be wary of like when they start talking about religion, and especially when they start talking about the history of the Crusades, that the Crusades aren't painted as this terrible thing. Like I hate it when people present them as some like, oh well, the Crusades were terrible. And it's like, first off, okay, war is terrible. Okay, war is terrible. But there is a justified reason to go to war, especially if people are attacking you or, threatening you to convert, like, which is what was happening. It is literally like just war is an application of self-defense on the aggregate. Like that's what that is. And so it's like crazy to me when people like try to sell it as like something like when I heard Pope Francis criticizing it, I don't know how to take that because I don't know what like his criticism didn't like when he said it, he didn't seem to say anything of substance to it. He just criticized it. Like you can Google it. I mean, it made news, right? Like it's very easy to find. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but it didn't seem like there was a substantial reason given um, that would justify removing it from the theology. Yep, just absolutely convenient. What is your cat's name, Starskim? She's a beautiful idiot. She's the best looking cat. That's what it is. So we are way off topic, but yeah, I guess that's it. So what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to have John back on, the artist, and he is going to, well, we're going to talk about his tabletop game that he made. And hopefully his Amazon page is up and I can redirect you to the Amazon page. So, if you're interested in tabletop games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons, but are similar to Dungeons and Dragons, that has a Catholic lean into it, because it absolutely does have a Catholic lean into it, please consider coming tomorrow as we talk about it, because we're going to talk probably around 8:15 Eastern Standard Time for maybe an hour, and we'll talk about the game. We'll talk about other things, but we really want to like help him because, he lives in a area that, although like he lives in Louisiana, and even though that wasn't hit with the devastation of hurricanes that hit like Carolina and Georgia and such, they were still hit by a hurricane earlier this year. And so the job market there is kind of in flux, and I want to help them out and give them some padded security as best I can. So yeah, I mean, I you didn't need to know that, but that's why I'm doing it, because it's a good game. My friends play it, and we play it, I should say, and it's got an interesting take that doesn't devolve into pagan degeneracy like Dungeons and Dragons. So, yeah, it is super cool. I mean, like he spent like that book. He said it was like 600 to 800 hours to make. Let's see if I have a version. Nope. I've got some stats books, but I don't have that book around. It's, I think, over there. But so I did play it with Late Night Levity, but that has kind of flopped. So yeah. Because people like dragons, but like that's the crazy thing, because dragons are supposed to be evil, right? Like, and there's like people like dragons, but they're supposed to be evil. But I like Dragonite. Dragonite's my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon. That's not a legendary, but like that's a problem because it represents the devil from the Catholic understanding of the Bible. So, obviously images and such change meanings, but from culture to culture. But obviously a dragon is not supposed to be understood as like a good thing, but it's considered a good, like a cool thing. So yes, with very few shenanigans. So I do want to emphasize though, my gosh, I'm not even drinking, like I'm drinking water, but like okay. But like the escapism is like fairly interesting because it's not like it's self, like it's not narcissistic per se. It's you're doing it with friends. Like you're having like a good time with your friends and you're embellishing characteristics that you have or you may want to try out. Like for example, um like if you want to be a racist elf, which my friend did, like you can do so like in jest and it's funny. Or you could be a, I don't know, like it's the way you can express your personality, it like gives you a practical, like what I think is very like intriguing about this and interesting is it allows for you to do something that you can't really do as an adult anywhere else, which is try out different personality types and expressions. And like I find that fascinating because like yeah, you are who you are. Like, you know, like I have a pretty like paladin-esque personality. It's pretty like boring, you know, for the most part. But like it would be interesting to play someone who has a personality type like a rogue and kind of put myself in a pair of shoes that I don't typically think about. Or maybe like I think about, but I always think about with like a certain type of structure in mind. Now, I'm not I'm not selling the point that you should change your morality structure, like some people suggest. But it is like it's you're LARPing, like you're pretending you're something you're not. Um, and there is a benefit to that as an adult that allows you to then take that experience and apply potentially um, creative solutions in other areas of your life. So like I like I'm a very big proponent that games should be something that you learn from, and that there is a certain point where like you really shouldn't like continue playing a game without like teaching someone. Um like or you shouldn't be what do you call it? I mean basically you grow up. Like I don't know how else to say it. Like you grow up and you don't do it anymore. But like Dungeons and Dragons or like what Master's Tale, which is what John did, um, it allows for you to play with something that like you just don't have access to in other avenues, like which is try out different personality types or to like get into a groove of how to express yourself that isn't wrong, but it's different from how you typically do it. And so like it creates a ground for like legitimate experimentation of expression. Uh, okay, absolutely, but I actually think that has more to do with video games than it does with um, Dungeons and Dragons. And the reason why I say that, or like Master's Tale, and the reason why I say that is because you play with a group of people, and in a lot of video games, like if I'm playing like Breath of the Wild, for example, if I'm playing Breath of the Wild, I'm the main character. I don't interact with anybody else. It's a self-contained game. I'm I'm saving the princess. I'm doing everything. Whereas like in role-playing games, it necessitates that you're interacting with other people, and you may not get the killing blow. You may not do certain things, but I also don't play. So here's the other thing. It also depends on your play group because like I don't play with people who are like, yeah, I'm gonna be the main character, like I'm gonna be the BA. Like everybody has a sense of like that we play, like we have a sense of we all have to do our part in some way. And as opposed to just like, I'm gonna take this axe and kill everything, and you're just gonna follow me. I've only played D&D 3 times, and I've played Master's Tale, I think 4. So I've technically played like more of John's game than D&D. So yeah, and the make believe. So I do think making like make believe is important. Um and this is kind of going into like psychology or whatever, but it's like I like, cuz John and I have talked about this a little bit, but and we may bring it up tomorrow, but it's this idea of fantasy shouldn't be something that goes so far, like it shouldn't be used just purely as escapism. Like there should be some benefit that you can gather that isn't just, all right, well, I'm relaxing and doing nothing. Like when I listen to the Exorcist files with my wife, that's a type of escapism that we have. However, we also are getting catechized on exorcism and what a practical exorcist does, because that's what the Vatican told Father Martins to do, and it's incredibly entertaining. So it's kind of like, you should, like, if you're going to waste time, like, don't actually waste time. Like, wasting time is actually a problem. Like, you're taking a nap, you have to rest. That's not wasting time. You have to nap, you have to rest. Like, your body needs to recharge. But like just doing something to do something, like as opposed to like doing something to gain something, some sort of potential benefit, like that's kind of my mindset. And so like, I don't know, maybe you are allowed to do escapism. I don't actually know. I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to just do escapism for the sake of escapism. Because our society is kind of filled with those people where they just like, I want to like go to the movies, and then after the movies I'm going to play a role-playing game, and then after the role-playing game I'm going to like smoke weed. And they're all forms of escapism in varying ways, and nothing gets done in their life. And so yeah. I mean, like, you hit it on the head. That's absolutely correct. Wow, I'm at 22 people. Nice. Thank you. I appreciate all of you watching. If you haven't liked, please like it. It does help. And but like, what was sad about that though is like when you deal with something like what Joe Rogan was talking about with abortion, like the fact that the DNC convention had an abortion on demand there and a vasectomy on demand. It's like, I'm sorry, like this can't paint like, oh, like the picture any clearer, like with how like the state of America we are. Like we do not have a replacement. Like we do not have a replacement of people in place. Like women are only having 1.62 births per woman. Our society is dying. And we're promoting that. Like it is dying figuratively and literally. Like in every sense of the word, our society is dying. And we need to turn that around. And some people think it's drastic. All right, ban abortions. Like that's not drastic. That's reasonable. Stop killing your kids. And then like going so far as to do something where like, I think the Philippines are one of the only countries that actually do this, but they ban contraception. Yeah, go ahead. Do that. Most of them are abortifacients anyway. Yeah. So I had this weird combination. I'll admit this because like it's something that I wasted a lot of time with is I played online. I played World of Warcraft. I got married and I still played World of Warcraft. And it was fun to play with my wife playing World of Warcraft. But it took way too much of my time and I didn't become ripped. I could have studied more. I mean, I was still studying like Catholicism at the time, but I could have did it more. And I felt like I wasted my early 20s in terms of like, not fully, obviously, because I'm married at this time, but a lot of my free time, I felt like I misused it. And there were better things I could have done. Now, don't get me wrong, like, that's not to say I didn't still do other things, but like, because I ran for office, like I said, I got married, I had kids, I was there, but like, there are also times when I wasn't, and I think that was wrong of me, very much so. And like, I don't allow my kids to play in any games like that because it is a time sink. Like, you are literally working, like you are paying someone to play a game in which you have to work at, which doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, that that that's kind of stupid. So that's my opinion. So, okay. So if you have other priorities that are more important, like, you can always come back to this later. And yeah, you can't interact with it, but like, don't be slothful. Because what you're describing is, or what you're kind of hinting at, is sloth. So, you need to have your priorities rightly ordered. I do appreciate conversing with you, and I'm trying not to say liberal, but but if you have to get that done, you're not getting it done, then yeah, you got to get it done. Let's see. Got to catch up. Got to catch up. Correct. I agree with you completely, Matthew. Yeah. Like, I mean, it depends also, like, because like what I'll do, like today I listened to a 3-hour conversation with JD Vance and Joe Rogan, but it was while I was inputting numbers and doing analysis. And so it was like background noise, but at the same time, like I get what you mean. Like, don't watch me for like 2 hours just screwing around. Like, if you've got better things to do, or if you're not gaining anything from it. That's true. That is true. And we did have fun talking to people in other countries and states. So like, it's not like a complete waste, but I definitely did spend too much time on it. Um, Hello, Robert Tales. So we were talking about Seth Rogen and JD Vance, and basically how like the argument of religion shouldn't be in politics, or like really what that translates to is your religion shouldn't be in politics because they'll impose their religion into politics. Even if they don't have a defined religion, they have, as described by Britannica, an inner attitude or conviction in which they follow. So basically, in a pluralistic society, um, the dominant religion still has influence, but at the same time, minor religions also had influence. So, um, yeah, and yeah, I wasted way too much time on WoW. Yeah, I never ever want to go back to my account and do /played. Just don't want to. I don't want to do that. Um, yeah, And you know what? Like, it's crazy because like some people will be like, well, you're doing work. That's not sloth. And I'm like, that's Protestant. Like, Protestantism brought in a, like, when it existed, it, or when not when it existed, but like that was something that happened where there's this kind of slight transition with the definition of sloth, kind of how this definition of faith is like changed from here to um, here, the belief in a deity or spiritual force, or just simply an inner attitude or conviction, right? Like, so that's an example of faith being transformed in a way that points culturally to what's being talked about. The same thing happened with sloth. So instead of saying the priorities in which you ought to do are not being followed and you're doing something else, it went to you're lazy. Like, that's essentially what people like. It was the watered down understanding, like most Protestant things. It's the watered down understanding of what the faith actually teaches. And so when you have something like the Protestant work ethic, I make the argument that that can be understood as sloth because you're not attending to your family or your family needs. You're focused on your job, which does account for, supplying the family what it needs. But your kid's not being raised by their dad or his dad. So that's, yeah. So good luck with the sloth. Definitely pray against the high noon devil. Let's see. Trying to get off playing video games and off being on the internet is making me aware of how depressed I really am. It was all just a distraction for me, at least. So I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you. But no, I don't want to say but. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you. Just know that when it comes to things like addictions or when you play something a lot, because I had a similar experience when I removed some of that. It's part of the withdrawal effect. Like, you're going to feel a little depressed. And so when you get out of that, when you bounce back from that, if you're still at a lower, if you're still depressed, I mean, okay, well, then you are depressed. But I'm just letting you know, like, it's normal to feel depressed when you're trying to give up something because you're trying to give it up and you like it, right? So I totally get where you're coming from. Okay. Thanks, Damien. Hopefully you didn't get drunk. Hopefully you didn't sin. Yeah. Yeah, Damien was playing a drinking game. I wasn't advocating for it. Damien was doing it. Let's see, good night. New favorite regular. All right. Let's see. Yes. Yeah, that's basically it. It's about not doing what you should be doing. But like I said, there is a Protestant influence that culturally people understand sloth as only being lazy, and so like that's a problem. Okay, so I should probably get off because I don't want to just like throw it unless you guys want to like say, yeah, like definitely do that. He's just really good. So I don't typically advertise just random things, but since I did bring up the Exorcist files, if you can listen to it, listen to it. Like, it is both entertaining and educational. And it's educational because it's using examples to show you like how things end up. And the one that Mandy and I just talked about, like, I had a question on whether he was going to talk, like, actually address this because Father Ripperger talks about it. and that's generational demons. And case 7 deals directly with generational demons. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Now we have 2 exorcists that are in the public eye that like both definitively talk about generational demons as a real thing. And so for me, that's a pretty big deal for a lot of reasons, but for like the fact that you can actually like compare them and see like what they're both saying and to trust it, and what they're both not saying, or maybe what they contradict. I don't know of any contradiction the 2 have said publicly where one has said one thing and one has said the other. I just know a lot of like keyboard crusaders that will go out of their way and say, well, Father Ripperture isn't the magisterium, or, Exorcist Files is this or whatever. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, no offense, I'm going to trust the priest who practically applies the faith in a way that most other priests do not. And they're in good standing with the church, and they've publicly stated these things, and they have not been corrected. So, and I know it's like I'm not going to listen to unless the keyboard warrior says something where like they definitively know that it contradicts whatever they said, which I don't think has ever happened. The at least not with me, but like this idea of like Father Ripperger, like because he has stated some things that have nothing to do with exorcisms, and may be wrong, that he must be wrong about all like some exorcist points. I'm like, no, like that doesn't follow. That's not logical. So let's see. Yeah, Acedia sucks. But yeah, definitely pray, like ask your guardian angel to help with the noonday devil. Ask that you'll have, oh man, I can't remember. Maybe I kind of wish Damien was here, because if he's studying the diaconate, he might know what this is, but starts with, I think, an S or a C, but it's the point in which God like basically reveals to you what you should do. And the noonday devil is the main like counter to distracting you from that. Like there are points in our lives where like certain experiences happen. And so that's, yeah. The noonday devil is very good at distracting a lot of people. Yes. And there's actually let me see if I can get my YouTube up for a second, because I don't. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna do it later. Yep. Yeah, we prayed for her, so. Yeah. So okay, all right. I'm gonna get going because it's been 2 hours, and I think we are. We were way off topic, but I do think it's important to bring this up because, and obviously, I'm a little adversarial in the points, and that's because I don't think so. I'm not talking about synthesis. Okay, yeah, we are so off topic though. So, but I might actually like cut off the second, like all the parts that have nothing to do with what we're actually talking about for this. But and my nose is starting to get clogged. Man, that sucks. But yeah, we're this idea of religion, just basically saying your religion is not welcome. Take my religion. My religion's pluralistic, and we do all the nice things. And it's like being nice is not enough. Like it certainly doesn't protect society enough just to be quote unquote nice. So I think that's something we have to fight back, because it isn't nice to let society, kill its citizens, to promote them to be self-serving to themselves through prawn and a number of other vices that people just consent to, and then like bring society down with them. Because as a statistician, like I look at this from the standpoint of the aggregate too. Like I'm very aware that if everybody, like if most men are on prawn, that sucks for the women, and that becomes a real issue for our society. So, yeah, I'm probably going to do that. So, yeah, me too. Thanks for joining. And yeah, if you want to, like, I don't know, if you want to, like, it's going to be, this is a little self-serving, so I'm going to be very honest with you guys. If you want to, like, recommend me in collabs with notable, let's just say, in good standing Catholics that are not promoting things that are like clearly not the church, that would be cool, because I'd love to talk about the statistics of the church, but it's hard to do that when it's just me and a camera. Like I do need, like I'm not one person, and like this whole experience with live streaming has shown me that I do need a back and forth to be able to fully express some of the points I want to make, either because I forget them myself, or because like it's just better to have two people talk about it and bounce ideas back and then have clarifying points, because I can't read your guys' mind, but it is good to have another mind to kind of, like I said, flesh out an idea. So yeah. So if you could do that, that'd be awesome. And I know that's kind of, again, it's a little self-serving, but I do think it would ultimately help with some of the points I'm trying to make. And obviously when it comes to rebuilding what we've like lost from my parents' generation and bringing back a deeper reverence in the faith, like that's really important to me. And I think a lot of people will see people like, not that they're bad, because I'm not going to say that or anything, but like you see Taylor Marshall or Kennedy Hall and they'll mock the Novus Ordo or they'll criticize the Novus Ordo, but it's like the Novus Ordo is what most people deal with, and the priests that are there have to, like they can't just move to a traditional Latin Mass, because they have to ask for permission from not just their bishop, but from the Vatican. So, like the whole idea of just simply criticizing it, I don't think is good. Like there's like almost nobody on the other side talking about real change happening with young priests. And like that absolutely happened with us. And I'm trying to get that out there because it's a possibility for all Novus Ordos. It's not going to happen for all of them, but if they have a priest that's listening to God and wants the church to flourish, like that's definitely something that I want to promote. So all right, I think everyone's gone, and that's okay. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow when we talk with John.